I hated history when I was in high school and middle school. I hated it. I hated it. But something was missing, and I believe it was intentional.
We're ready. We're prepared. Do not give in to fear. We are fearless. This is not the time to be afraid. This is a time to stand up and fight back and to resist any temptation for them to divide us. We're in this together. The rule of law is on our side. We will not give in, not give up. We will not capitulate. We will not bow. We will not bend. We will survive.
I was thinking about, the questions that we ask as journalists. And oftentimes there's a viral video going around from 8 years ago with me and Steve Adubato, and people are like, he's being hostile. He's asking her questions. I'm like, that's what a journalist does. And it is such a dynamic interview because he's pressing me to say things. And I was thinking about that as I was watching it back, because it is fire, by the way. If it's come across your timeline, do click on it and watch it, especially on my IG or on my YouTube. Because, and I don't mind other people getting paid, but it is my intellectual property and his. But I was thinking about somebody criticizing me about asking Dr. Frances Cress Welsing questions. This space, when you come into this space on these radio airwaves and you sit in front of a journalist, we're going to ask you questions. I may love you. I may love you from the top of your head to the soles of your feet. I may want all of the goodness for you. And in many ways, the only way I can get all of the goodness to come out is by asking good questions. And sometimes the questions are, hard questions. And sometimes they're questions that I know the answers to, but I need to shape the interview in such a way that I want everyone else to know what I already know, which is why when I was teaching and I would send my students out to do assignments, I would always say, you can never interview someone you know. Someone you are friends with, somebody in your family, because you're not going to ask the journalistic questions because you already think you know. So a lot of times I don't even read people's books necessarily or sit with a bunch of, because, there's different ways to do this. I'm very seasoned, by the way. I can get away with this. If you're new at this, you got to read everything. You got to know everything, and you should know everything. You should come in as prepared as Clay Kane is. For me, though, I'm doing something a little different. I'm doing a discovery kind of journalism where I want the people who are listening to discover. Now, I have enough tertiary knowledge of most topics to come into any interview just prepared because life has prepared me. But the tough questions are what you're supposed to do. You can't be mad at a journalist for asking questions. We talked to Brian Karam yesterday. The president of the United States won't even take tough questions. How weak are you? How small are you? I take all questions. Call 866-801-8255. Why? Because the great questions elicit the amazing responses. We need more journalists and more people asking good questions. Not ignorant ass questions, good questions. And the best questions are asked by people who already know the answer. Or they think they know the answer. Or maybe there's some nuance to the answers. But you got to ask good questions. All right, put that over there. Let's get back to Clay Kane. The Clay Kane Show, by the way, if you've never listened to it, where have you been? Noon to 3. Before that, Louis Daniel Favors, 10 to noon. Before that, Urban View Mornings, 7 to 10 a.m. Eastern. Where have you been? Come on through. So Joseph called and was like, thank you. Thank you for this history lesson. Thank you for the work that you put in. First time caller. Play Clay's response, Miss.
It's hard to be in these schools, in these classrooms. Thank you for your call, Mr. Joseph. And to be a young person, to be a young Black person, a young kid. And you hear these stories about history, right? And you feel like something is missing. You feel like something is missing. You're like, damn, this is weird. Like, this don't even sound right. How did this happen? And you're confused. And you're like, yo, I can't even, something is missing. And then you get in college, you got to pay for these classes, and you say, that's what it was. That's what it was. I hated history when I was in high school and middle school. I hated it. I hated it. but something was missing, and I believe it was intentional. And this is all love to my parents. They were working every single day. They probably didn't know the history either. You know, my father got up at 4 a.m. to work, like, you know what I mean, worked for SEPTA. This is no disrespect to my amazing family. They probably didn't know, but it's the challenge. And I'm just so grateful that Mr. Joseph can call in and say, yo, I haven't heard this since 1971. And that's my hope. That's my hope. That's in my heart, that I can use this platform to remind people. Remembering is resistance.
Yes. Yes. Remembering is resistance. I love this. I love this. I love this. I was, before I came in today, mapping out the next month of Karen Hunter is Awesome. Smiz and I have been in the lab for several weeks, and it is tedious. At the same time, it is refreshing at the same time, because I am built to not necessarily do the sand coat. I'm always full steam ahead. Full steam ahead. What's next? What's next? This is the metronome in my head. What's next? What's next? What's next? Okay, and then what? Okay, and then what? Okay, and then what? That's how I move. I chug along. It's always forward, breaking through. But this podcast has forced me to sit in what was done. And we may have periods throughout the year where we're putting together a best of, especially around Christmas, the holiday time, where I have to comb through 10 years of interviews. And, sometimes we just pick stuff and, okay, the theme is right. But I'm literally listening to hours of commentary and conversations. And what Clay said about the remembering, I just put together a piece on Watchmen, but it's not really on Watchmen. It's for Black Wall Street, Tulsa, Oklahoma, that whole memorial that's coming up, Memorial Day weekend. And for the podcast, I'm sitting there and I'm like, the thing that we're talking about is the thing that Clay is saying. For a lot of you, and I had the same experience. I grew up in a household with people that had books in the household, and people, that knew history, that, as I mentioned many times, I had to watch Eyes on the Prize, and I had, there was a lot of Black culture and history in my home. The Bill Cosby Show had that picture with the Black women. My mom went out and got it. It was on our wall. So there was a lot of that. But I do remember sitting in a classroom with all white teachers in high school. I went to Catholic school, and my history was never taught. I learned Shakespeare, Chaucer. I learned Mark Twain. Tale of Two Cities was my jam. But I never learned about Zora Neale Hurston. I never learned about Toni Morrison. I never learned about James Baldwin. I never learned about Richard Wright, Black boy. We didn't read any of that. And I didn't learn any history. And the only history that pertained to me was that one chapter. It was a couple of pages actually on slavery and slaves. And that picture of Black folk in the cargo holds of ships stacked like sardines will never leave my mind. And Clay not liking history, and so many of you not liking history. And I also know, sitting in class with Carr for the last 5 years, how many of you are angry that these things were never taught. I'm talking about MOVE, yesterday, today. History was made in Omaha, Nebraska, birthplace of Malcolm X, who will turn 100 had he lived next Monday. I'm also working on fresh content for Karen Hunter is Awesome with that, as well as on this show. We're going to have a special day commemorating Malcolm X's birth. But at the time he was living, he was a terrorist. This government labeled him so many things, and even in our community, troublemaker. But we have a responsibility, and I was going through a conversation I was having with Dele Atunde, Kareem Graves, and Drew McCaskill over Watchmen. And we got around to the importance, because the producer of Watchmen was a guy that wasn't Black. He was a white guy, Damon Lindelof. And he was inspired by Ta-Nehisi Coates' Between the World and Me. That led him to the Atlantic's case for reparations. That led him to, so he's going down a rabbit hole, like piecing this thing together. And then he ran into Oscar Micheaux and Bass Reeves. And then he ran into Tulsa, Oklahoma, Black Wall Street. And his question was, why didn't I know this? And the funny thing is, when he went out and talked to other people who lacked melanin. I'm not talking about the redheads today. They were like, I didn't know this, but then they moved on. Because to sit in the facts and the history and the truth it requires something of you. It requires you to do something with the facts, the truth. You can brush it off, but once you know, you can't unknow. So I feel like we're in a period of time, and maybe it's always been this period of time, when people would rather not know than to know, because knowing requires you to do something. You may not think so. And knowing is uncomfortable, because we talked about that too. The discomfort of, I was taught this, whether we're talking about religion or history or anything. I was taught the earth was flat. Imagine those people. Well, I can't imagine, because people died for talking about the earth being round. Socrates, all he said was, let's ask questions. They were like, question? Oh no, you're gonna have to take this hemlock. Where you get that? Oh, them Africans taught you? Okay, here. You got to be up out of here. Can't be telling these young people that question us. My motto is ask questions. Ask all of the questions. Question everything. Question everything, hold it up against the light, find second and third sources, and then come back. And you may land on, I was right all the time. But you got to challenge your beliefs, because we have been indoctrinated for a reason. There's a reason why there was a slave Bible. There's a reason why it was illegal for you to read. There was a reason why 2 or more gathered was a problem. Sharing knowledge through drums. There was a reason why those were outlawed. There's a reason. And it's steeped in your knowledge is your power. So if you're uncurious, fix that, because you can. And the passion and emotion that I heard from Clay today, it moved me to know, first of all, everything we do here is correct. We are on the right page. I'm so happy to be in this space. And more importantly, I'm happy to have envisioned it, because the vision produced the manifestation. I thought about it. This would not be here if I didn't sit in that little nasty studio and say, well, what would happen if I approach these people? All they could do is tell me no. But I'm going to ask, and I'm going to craft my ask in a way that it would be impossible for them to tell me no. There'd be no reason to tell me no, other than perhaps, you know the answer to that. And then I need to know that anyway. But we live in capitalism. Do we live in capitalism? Yes. Capitalism fueled by racism, but ultimately they want to make money, a difference or whatever. And if it can save money or make money, and you present the case, then here we are. Now, I still hadn't figured out how I was going to make money. But then if you're not driven by that, you can make differences in the world. If you're not fueled by the dollar, you can make a difference. So here we are today. I'm so incredibly happy.
We're ready. We're prepared. Do not give in to fear. We are fearless. This is not the time to be afraid. This is a time to stand up and fight back, and to resist any temptation for them to divide us. We're in this together. The rule of law is on our side. We will not give in, not give up. We will not capitulate. We will not bow. We will not bend. We will